In life, we all encounter obstacles, and those obstacles come in all different shapes, sizes, and forms. The question is, how do we handle those obstacles? Do we attack them head on, or do we allow them to make us quit? Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to motivate and inspire listeners to never give up on themselves, their dreams, or their goals. We will interview successful people from all walks of life as they share their no-quit stories when they had the choice to give up or give in, but they didn't. We hope you find our episodes inspiring, motivating, positive, and thought-provoking. We thank you for listening, and we hope to be that jolt of positivity as you go for your greatness. Welcome to episode number 92 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is optimism. Our quote of the day comes to us from Colin Powell. Perpetual optimism is a force multiplier. I'm really excited to bring you today's episode. Our guest is a gentleman by the name of Casey Moran. He is all about results and taking action. In today's episode, Casey references the concept of just doing it. I think many of us are guilty of not taking enough action. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Casey, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Appreciate you spending some time with us today. So the first question we ask is, are you ready to make it happen today?
Always. Let's do this.
Awesome. So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never give up on themselves or their dreams and goals. And I was curious if you had either a story about perseverance or perhaps a challenging time that tested you and you could have given up, but you didn't.
Well, as an entrepreneur, that's like all the time, but I guess that's what we signed up for. The one story that I would go to, and I probably always will, is when I started my first company, which I was a senior at Arizona State University, and I was thinking, oh, I'll go to law school, because that's what you're supposed to do. But I was not good at school, and I did not like school, so why would I go to law school? What I was good at was like partying and drinking. And I had designed this double bubble shot glass, and, I'd take it around to parties just for recreational use. And everybody would ask me, they're like, what is that? And where can I get one? So finally I was like, well, why wouldn't they get it from me? So ASU had this patent library. So I spent months down there, found out there's no patent. And I was like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. So I told everybody, oh, I'm going to start this shot glass company. And everyone, including family and friends, they were like, what? They're like, you're crazy. And, nobody believed in me. And so, I was rebellious and competitive. So I was like, oh, now I have to do it. So I remember I was sitting there at my house that night, and I had this little, college line notebook in front of me. And, I didn't have any discipline. Like I said, I was a partier, and, I didn't know how to start a company. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to do it. So I simply opened this notebook up and I wrote down what I was going to do the next day that night. And so then I woke up the next day and I simply went through the first thing, the second thing, and I went all the way down the line. And at the end of the day, I was like, wow, I got a lot done. So I did it again the next day and the next and so on. And, that kind of helped me give me that structure that I needed to, go find a manufacturer and go, get the patent process done and, all the things that you need to do in order to start this idea, from scratch and form it into a company. Well, the first year, my total revenues was $5,000. And so I remember, months I'd call my mom and I'd be like, hey mom, I need rent money. And, it was barely scraping by because I quit my job. I mean, I was all in on this thing, there was no thought that it could fail. Like I was a firm believer. But, at the end of the year, everyone's like, what are you doing? Like, come on, just, give it up, go get a job, whatever. And I found out that there was this, in Las Vegas in March, there's a trade show called the Nightclub and Bar Show. And I thought, okay, so I live in, Arizona, so I'm a drive away. So I grabbed some of my friends and we literally just threw shot glasses in the back of this SUV and we drove up to Vegas to this trade show. And I had no clue what goes on at a trade show. I'd never been to one. We bought a 10 by 10 space, there, which was basically all the money I had. We knew that the college kids liked it, but it was now like, okay, what is the industry going to think? We didn't have a carpet. Like we had like these 8 by 10 sort of pictures hanging on like back then we called it the ghetto booth. Like people would come by, they're like, you don't even have a car. Like, yeah, but this is what we're doing and this is what we got. So this product, if you just look at the glass, you're like, okay, that's a cool glass, but you don't know what it is. So you have to demonstrate it. So we went around to everybody, gathered chasers and liquors and all these different things so we can pour and demonstrate. And one of our favorite recipes was Captain Morgan and Sprite. It was sort of like a cream soda taste. It was really good. And right across from us at this time, Seagram's was a huge distributor, and they had Captain Morgan. So they had this gigantic booth. It was literally like 20 booths combined, but it was made up of this huge bar with these, 15 servers and bartenders. So I walk over there, and I'm like, hey, this is what we do. And, Captain Morgan's one of our favorites. If you give us some, we'll prominently display and promote your product, as we pour. And the guy's like, no. So I walked back to my booth, and I was sort of dejected, but, we still had, a ton of everything else that we needed. So it was no big deal. So I'm sitting there, and about, the show starts, and people come up, and then more people, and then more people. And 2 hours into the show, I remember stepping back to the back of the booth, watching my friends, pour for all of these people. We literally had 8 people wide, 8 people deep. Like, we were the busiest booth around. We were blocking the aisle, and I looked up over at the Seagram's booth, and all these 15 bartenders and servers standing there with nobody around, and they're all looking at our booth like, what is going on over there? And it was at that moment that I went, it's going to be okay. So it took a year and a half, but I never ever once thought like, oh, this thing's going to fail. It was I guess it was a blind faith, that naive, notion. And, if you believe in something, just do it.
I appreciate you sharing that with us, Casey. If you wouldn't mind just telling our listeners a little bit about what you're doing now and who the Casey is today.
So when I sold my first company, which is, about 4 or 5 years ago now, I was like, whoa, what do I want to do with the rest of my life? And I'd always been into personal development. So, I dove into kind of my own research into, why we do the things we do. And I became a coach. And so I started, personally coaching people. I'd kind of coached people back in my other business entrepreneurially, but now I was doing it, just on an everyday basis for people just trying to achieve their goals. So that's basically what I do. And then last year, I wanted to take myself to the next level, and I didn't know what that was. And, I tell my clients, because a lot of them, they need one of 3 things normally. My clients who come to me, they need, direction, structure, and or accountability. And so what I do is just like I started my first company with this little notebook, I tell them to go get a notebook, a little, college line notebook. And this one client came back with this cool thing. He's like, oh, I got this off Amazon. And it was this organizer planner thing. And it was the coolest thing. It had, gratitude sections and, all these cool little elements to it. So the entrepreneur in me, 2 days later was like, why wouldn't I just put my program into a book like that? So yeah, I remember it was July 4th of last year. And I stayed in all day, and I remember it was at like 9 at night, and I heard fireworks going off. I'm like, oh yeah, it's 4th of July. That's the day I started this new sort of project. And I did a Kickstarter that was successful, and the books just came in December. And so now they're here. It's called True Path, and it's basically a 13-week goal setting guide that gives you direction, structure, and accountability, and it's all in the form of a daily planner.
And I must share with our listeners that Casey was kind enough to send me a book, and I've been using it for the last couple of days, and I would highly recommend it to our listeners. Not so much per se your actual planner, as far as obviously I'd love for our listeners to check it out. But one thing I want to touch on is the importance of the consistency. And you use 3 words that I love is direction, structure, and accountability. And obviously when you and I were talking yesterday before we scheduled our podcast interview, as I was talking to you about how accountability and self-accountability are 2 of the main pillars for No Quit Living in our company. We do with our coaching, training, as well as our speaking. So I love that aspect of it. But I have to share with our listeners that what I love about your planner is the simplicity of what it does. And I'm not in any way saying that it's a simplistic and there's not a lot of thought into it, because there clearly is. But my point is that the reason why I believe your clients are successful and the reason why you're successful what you do and the reason why your planner is going to be successful is because of those three words. You give your clients direction, you give your clients structure, and then you hold them accountable. And I think those are three things that are really important. And, I want to also mention to our listeners is that we talk about having structure and we talk about accountability and we talk about a lot of things that are in and around the entrepreneurial space. And I just want to be clear that this podcast obviously touches on all those things, but this type of planner is not for somebody that's just in the entrepreneurial world or in the business or sales. It's for anybody that wants to accomplish anything, whether it's a big goal, small goal. But what I love about your planner is that it's broken down into 13 weeks. And I think when people get planners and things, a lot of them are a year long, and it's pretty daunting. So I appreciate the fact that you've done that. And then I wanted to ask you, yesterday we spoke about the neuroscience, I believe, that you were that you were researching. Could you just touch on that for a bit?
Yeah, so when I first got to Arizona State, I wanted to be a psychology major. And I went to the counselor and she was like, oh, you need this much math, you need this much science. And I was not inclined at that time in either of those. So I was like, pass. And so she's like, go over to communications. So that's what I ended up doing. So, and then I started this company, and when I sold it, I wanted to get back into it. I was ready. And so I just started doing some readings. The first book, and when I say neuroscience, I'm talking the pragmatic, approach to it. I'm not talking about, the details within, PhD type, but it was, the book was The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. And it was just the coolest book. And it really kind of turned that light switch on that was, it showed you why you do the things you do and the way the brain sort of works. So what I try and do, and you kind of hinted on it, where the planner is very simple, and it's simple for a reason, because that's what our brain likes to do, is to have simple things, but it's very powerful as long as you follow it. So, that it's designed in that sort of, structure, as in just to kind of lead you in the way naturally the way the brain wants to work.
I think the concept of your planner is just really interesting, because you mentioned the simplicity of it. And I think that's why a lot of these programs that are out there work, and it's why I believe a lot of the programs that are out there don't work. And the reason being is, let's say I'm a person that comes to you and I'm interested in hiring you as a coach, whether it's business, personal, what have you. If you come back to me and say, okay, Chris, I'm going to give you a 52-step system that you have to spend, an hour to 2 hours every day, that might work for me. That might be horrendous for your next 5 clients or 5 potential clients. But what I love about your program is similar, not identical nor exactly the same, but similar to some of the stuff we talk about at No Quit Living, is if you spend 5 or 10 minutes a day in the morning and 5 or 10 minutes throughout the day, or 5 or 10 minutes at night, and you're specific with your goals, your objectives, but you hold yourself accountable and you have discipline in some of those areas that you're looking to improve, you're going to be successful. And I think what I love about your planner is the simplicity of a 13-week program, which almost anybody and almost all of our listeners could break things down in 13 weeks, as opposed to, again, a 52-week challenge or 52 steps to getting your goal or objective or whatnot. And it's one of the things we talk about with No Quit Living is two of the things that people have as far as their goals, I find more often than not, are number 1 is losing weight and getting in better shape, and number 2 is getting out of debt or getting to the point where you can make a down payment for a house. And when you look at those 3 things, at the end result, they're very daunting. So for example, if you needed to lose 40 pounds, it's a big number. And what we talk about and how we break it down in No Quit Living is saying, okay, if you want to lose 40 pounds or if you need to pay off $50,000 of debt, don't look at that 40 or 50. Look at the first 100 and then the first 500 and the first 1,000. And when you break it down to that, not only are they bite-sized pieces, but the thing that we emphasize all the time is you have little victories and consistent victories along the way, which keep people going. So I love that aspect about it. Switch things up here for a second. If you had to define yourself in one word, what would that word be?
Optimistic.
I like that. And why is that?
I've just always been that way. I think ever since I was young, and I don't know. I've just always been kind of a happy-go-lucky, I'm going to just go do it and, jump and then find out what happens. And I'm always positive about anything that happens, and even my friends and family will tell me, they're like, do you ever get down? And of course, there's times where, you're like, oh man, but that's what I kind of find the fun in life is those challenges that come up, find the solution. We live in a society where we're always focusing in on the problems, and that's the wrong way to look at it. You have to switch it and look at the solutions. Like something, life's always going to come up, and there's always going to be these challenges and these obstacles. Don't look at those. Look at what you can do about those. And when you start to do that, you start to learn about not just life, but about yourself as well.
No, I like that. And something we talk about, and I was at a speaking event a couple of weekends ago, and I was asked a question about the same exact thing, which is, why is your company titled No Quit Living? And for me, I'm a positive person. And like you said, life hits you, and life's going to punch you in the mouth. And the question is, what do you do? And I love the fact that you referenced it, is when those challenges come up, find the solution. And I think what people do is they focus on the problem and say, this happened, and this is not good. And regardless, the problem's there. The problem's not going to go away. And one of the things we've been talking about throughout the beginning part of 2018 is your next challenge. Look at it instead of a problem. Look at it as your next big opportunity.
Bingo. Love it.
So one of the things we're looking to do is always add value to our clients and make them think about different things. And we always look to do the same thing with our podcast and our listeners. And I was curious if you have either a daily or a morning ritual that you swear by.
Oh, for sure. Actually in the planner, there's a little section, and it's at the very top of, the scheduling of your day, and it's called Win My Morning. And it's exactly that. If you can win your morning, you're going to win your day. It's just the way it is. And again, it's the way the brain functions. Before I get into my routine and what I do, I'll tell you one thing you should not do, and that is wake up. And I used to do this, and I know many do. You wake up and you grab your phone, and you start looking at emails or texts or whatever that's coming at you. And what happens when you do that is you start your day in a reactive state. And so you start your day that way, you're basically going to live your day that way, and just reacting to things. And that's not how you want to do it. So having a morning routine, if you are one of those, which is most people, I believe, they just grab their phone, make that the first part of your routine, is not to do that. So get up. Like, I'll give you my morning routine. It's super simple. I switched from coffee to tea a couple of years ago just because I couldn't handle the buzz of the ups and downs of the coffee. But I brew it just like coffee. It's a loose leaf. So I get up, I start my tea, I jump back into bed, and I do breathing exercises, which is sort of my meditative exercise for the morning as my tea brews. Then I get up and I go pour my cup, and while it's cooling, I do some light stretching. And then once that's done, I do a little motivational reading, and that is basically it. And then I can open my laptop and look at my phone and start my day that way. But so you see what I do there. It's very simple in what I do, but at the same time, I'm doing things that are positive. And I actually call it PEM, which is PEM, which is physical, emotional, and mental. If you can add those three elements to your morning routine, it's definitely going to help you with your mindset throughout the day. Also, in the planner, there's two sections. I'll tell you, I fill my planner out the night before, except for two sections. The gratitude and the mindset section I leave blank for the morning, and I will do that before I get into my work, because if you do sit there and whether you're grateful for something big or that cup of coffee or tea that you're having, be grateful for something that morning, and it's going to set you up for a positive mindset for that day.
No, I think it's really interesting that you touched on that, because so many of our guests have had and discuss some type of morning ritual. And I have to say there've been some that are very similar. There are some that are very different. But the reality of all the successful people that we've had on our show is that they have some type of ritual. And the one thing that I could not agree more with is the whole electronic component. And I myself have been guilty for many years, and I still do it to an extent now, but it's definitely something that I'm looking to work on myself. And I have 3 young kids, and I'm looking to spend more of the quality non-electric time with them, and I want them to see me doing some of that, because I'm a little bit worried of where technology is going. Don't get me wrong. I think it's amazing where it's going as far as some of the things that are happening. But I think as a culture, and especially as a country, we are way too connected to the technology where it's almost like if you don't have your phone or a tablet in your hand, a lot of times, even I feel it, where you're kind of like, oh my God, am I going to be okay?
I'm okay. I love what you just said. And it's so funny because last year I lost my phone, and so then I went and got a replacement, and then I jumped in the pool the next day with that phone. So when I went back, they couldn't get me a new phone for like another day. So I was without a phone for a day. And I remember jumped in my car and I'm driving down the street and I'm like, what, I feel kind of lost here. What if something happens? What am I going to do? And it's just the funniest thing because we become so attached to them. And like you said, there's great, things, in the advancement of technology, but at the same time, it also, it's kind of scary, especially with the children, what's going to happen.
Yeah, no, that is a pretty interesting story that you shared. I would not recommend to our listeners, if you're looking to get rid of your phone, you don't need to per se just jump in a pool. There's some other ways you could avoid that as well.
I didn't mean to.
Well, maybe it was just a sign from above or something that you needed to.
I love it. There you go.
Need to take a step away from. So we're going to change lanes here for a second. And I wanted to ask, if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
So, okay, because they're alive, I'm not going to go there because there's still a chance. Like Elon Musk or Tony Robbins or, those guys. But they're alive, so you never know. I'll go with Thomas Edison.
That is awesome. So I have to share with you that every episode we have a quote of the day. And for the episode that actually is going to come out before this gets released, the quote this morning that I was working on for that episode, it was Thomas Edison's quote. So that's pretty interesting that you said that.
That's great because that's one thing. If you're just sitting there, at dinner with him, just the quotes in itself that he came out with were outstanding. So that's awesome.
I wonder if you were having dinner with someone that is known for having great quotes. I wonder if they would actually recite their own quotes, or if that would just be kind of weird.
They may do it and not even know it.
So speaking of quotes, I was curious, do you have a favorite all-time quote?
Okay, and I'll tell you, I come up with quotes a lot myself. And who knows if they're actually authentic or if I'm just, I ripped them off somewhere. There's a few. There's one that I used to say all the time, which was, well, you know what? Well, the one I used to say is live for today, but remember tomorrow. Because you want to be in the moment, in the day, but you also, and for me, I was reckless back in the day. You got to remember there's a tomorrow. So that's kind of where that fit in. But there's one that I'm doing now that I really enjoy, and it's be better tomorrow than you were yesterday by taking action today.
Just so you know, both of those quotes are mine, so you'll be hearing from my attorney.
Beautiful. All right.
My attorney will be sending you a letter tomorrow.
I'll bring it.
So what is the best advice you remember receiving?
Man, the best advice. Yeah, this is, and it's actually not even advice from someone. It's a slogan, and it's Nike. Just do it.
Nike, they're pretty famous. I've heard of them.
Yeah, well, the reason I say that is, and I recite that a lot of times to my clients and friends and family and people, because we always have these thoughts and these ideas, and we're like, oh, this would be awesome, this would be great. Okay, well, then just do it. Right? Like, we think about these things all the time, but we don't take action on them. So it's such a simple, quote or, slogan or whatever you want to call it. But if you just apply that in your life on a daily basis, whether it's like, oh, I need to do the laundry, just do it. Or I have this idea for a company. Okay, well, just do it. Right?
No, I think it's great advice, and it is very simplistic. And obviously Nike's been extremely successful in different ways. But I think why that quote is so successful is because it resonates with so many people, because everybody at some point in their life, whether you're 15 years old or you're 55 years old, every single one of us has had the disease of the coulda, woulda, shouldas. And I also heard something that was interesting, that the wealthiest place in the world is our cemeteries. And I remember the first time I heard it, I kind of thought for a second, but then, and I forget who said it, but then they went on to continue that. And the reason being is that cemeteries are filled with the billion-dollar ideas, the billion-dollar businesses that were never created, the songs that were never written, the movies that were never
nice,
the relationships that were never established. So I think that slogan of "just do it" is awesome. And for our listeners with No Quit Living, that's one of the things we talk about all the time. And I shared this with you. But when we look at the 3 A's of accountability, it's application, it's action, and it's attitude. And you've touched on the positivity piece a little bit, and you've touched on the action a lot. And I think it's just so important. And I think the "just do it" really fits well with that. So maybe Nike would like to be a sponsor. So if anybody has a direct connection to Phil Knight or whoever the new CEO is now, please just let them know.
Please. And I'm a huge sports fan, so bring it.
All right. So here we're going to change direction with the interview. And this is where we like to get to know our guests a little bit more. So we call these the hot seat questions. So the only requirement is just for you to spit out the first thing that comes to mind.
Oh, goodness. All right.
So if you had one last meal and you knew it was your last meal, what would you pick?
Oh, it would have to be something seafood. You know what? Okay. A big thing of Dungeness crab. There we go.
Okay. That is the first we've heard that. Favorite sport?
Football.
Favorite team?
Broncos.
Sorry to hear that.
Who are you?
I'm not going to talk about that this season.
Okay.
New York Giants.
Ooh, ouch.
All-time favorite movie?
Wall Street.
Great flick. Favorite book?
Ooh, goodness. You know, I'll go back to The Power Habit.
Favorite singer or band?
Oh, Led Zeppelin. Hammer of the Gods.
If you were in a foxhole and you could only choose one person to have in your corner, who would it be?
My stepdad.
Now, I'm taking this last question from a very good friend of mine, Justin Shank, who is the host of the Growth Now podcast, and he's become a good friend. And I was on his show and he was on mine, and he asked me this question. I haven't asked it since, but I'm going to ask it. What is your favorite smell?
Oh my, ocean.
All right, he asked he asked me that, and I think I said either food or pizza just because it was weird, and I really didn't know what to. So I give you kudos because you answered that pretty quickly.
Yeah, I live in Arizona and I grew up in California, so that is one thing I miss probably the most is the ocean.
Oh, so you have the ocean, California and Arizona. Tough weather there. I'm sorry, very sorry you have to struggle through that.
Oh yeah.
So before we let you go, I wanted to ask if you have any parting words you'd like to leave our listeners with.
Parting words. Yeah, you know what? Okay, so we live. My parting words are live an inside-out life, and we live in this outside-in world where there is a ton of information out there. People are more than willing to share their opinions and thoughts with you. We're always looking for answers and, from the outside and this and that. And what I say is take in 100% of the information that people give you and that's out there, available to you. Take 100% in, but get rid of that 95 that doesn't work for you and keep the 5 that does. And that's your lane. And when you do that, it's a pretty special time, and you start to live, more of an inside out, where you start to truly do what you want to do, not what they want to do. So, one of my sayings is live life your way, not theirs. And in order to actually do that, to live that sort of life, you have to know yourself. And, we think we know ourselves, 100%, but really we know ourselves about as well as the last time, we've done a self-evaluation, which, we just had, that could have been in December, it could have been 6 months ago, could have been 5 years ago. And every experience that we have, changes us one way or another, whether it's a conversation or, a show you're watching or whatever. So until you do that sort of self-eval, you don't really know yourself 100%. And what's kind of cool, going back to my my planner, the True Path, is you start out with the first thing is the My Life exercise, where you look at your life as a whole, and then on the daily pages, which you do every day, the last thing you do, the question is, what'd you learn? Because another one of my sayings is, if you're not learning, you're losing. So you better be learning something, whether it's good, bad, or mundane.
I like that, and it's something we touch on quite often. Is we refer to it as ABL, which is always be learning. Nice.
I'm gonna use that. Can I use that one?
Yeah, I mean, you took my other two quotes, so why not just take another one?
Well, there you go.
Note to my attorney, please send Casey another letter tomorrow.
There you go.
So last question, and I promise it's the easiest one. For our listeners who would like to either connect with you or find out a little bit more how they can get your planner, what's the best way for them to do that?
If they want to contact me, like I have my personal site, which is just my name, CaseyMoran.com. If they're interested in the planner, it's truepathplanner.com. You can also just go to Amazon and put in True Path Planner. That'll come up. And then social media wise, Do Life Your Way is most of them.
Do Life Your Way. I love it. Well, listen, Casey, it's been really great having you on here today. It was fun connecting prior to doing the interview, and you shared some really neat stuff with us. And I would definitely recommend to our listeners to follow you on social media, but also to check out both your site for your planner as well as your personal one. And just wanted to say thank you again for your time and what you shared with us today.
Hey, I appreciate it. Appreciate having me on.
Thank you for listening to episode number 92. Casey shared some great stuff with us today, and I hope you apply some of what you heard. When we spoke about morning rituals, Casey said something that really hit me. He mentioned how if we win our morning, we are more likely to win the rest of the day as well. He then spoke about avoiding our phones or tablets the first thing in the morning because it puts us in a reactive state for the rest of the day. It's a pretty interesting but very true perspective if you think about it. One thing that Casey said really stood out to me. He mentioned the importance of how we look at challenges, and when challenges do arise, we need to focus on the solutions, not the problem. So in closing, my question to our audience today is just that. When challenges arise in your life, how do you handle them? Do you frame them as negative and being a problem, or do you look at them as your next big opportunity? Today's call to action is very simple. When your next challenge presents itself, attack it with positivity and a focused approach as you go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.